Hey guys, tonight's book is a book for older children, so this is not a book for kindergarten through third grade. I would say fourth grade and up. It is a Patricia Polacco book. She does wonderful children's books, but sometimes her subject matter is for older children. So just fair warning, it does have to do with the Civil War. Kids, if you're listening, the Civil War was the war between the North and the South. A lot of that war was over slave rights. So during that time in American history, there was a thing called slavery, where people actually could own someone else. And a lot of times we hear that, we say, well, that's just crazy, right? But there was a time when you could actually own a person. And there were this was our African American brothers and sisters. People would go to Africa and they would kidnap people and bring them over and then sell them. And you would belong to somebody. And I've had students before say, well, if that happened to me, I would just run away. Well, you couldn't run away. If you did, you could be killed, or they could hurt you. So it's not something that could just disappear. Okay? And during this time, during this war, there were people who fought for slavery, to have slaves, and there were people who fought against having slaves. And in this book, we meet two characters, Pink and Say, and they are fighting against slavery, against having slaves. Pink is actually a slave himself, and he is fighting in the war. Say is from Ohio, and he is considered a northern state. He is fighting against slavery himself. And one is hurt and the other one rescues him. Okay? So, and it's a true story because one of these characters was actually related to Patricia Polacco. So this is a story about someone in her family. So it's a really cool story. Again, fourth grade and higher. Okay? Pink and Say by Patricia Polacco. When Sheldon Russell Curtis told this story to his daughter, Rose, she kept every word of it in her heart and was to retell it many times over her long lifetime. Sheldon had been injured in a fierce battle and was left to die in the mud, blood-soaked pasture somewhere in Georgia. He was a mere lad of 15. He lay there for 2 days by his reckoning, only to slip into unconsciousness and fever. He was rescued in this field by another lad who had also been separated from his company. I will tell it to you in his own words, as clearly as I can. I watched the sun edge towards the center of the sky above me. I was hurt real bad. For almost a year, I had been in this man's war, a war between the states. Being just a lad, I was wishing I was home. My leg burned, and I was angry from the lead ball that was lodged in just above my knee. I felt sleepy, and everything would go black. Then I'd wake up again, and I wanted to go back to our farm in Ohio. And sometimes, when I'd fall into it then again, to strange sleeps, and I thought I was back home to my ma, tasting baking powder biscuits fresh out of the wood stove. And then I heard a voice. For a moment, I thought it was a fever dream, but then I felt a strong hand touch my brow and a splash of water in my face. Being here, boy, means you're going to be dead, said the voice, who gave me a drink of water from his kit. Where you hit, because if you hit in the belly, I'm going to have to leave you here, he said. I had never seen a man like him so close up before. His skin was the color of polished mahogany. He was flying Union colors like me. His age, maybe mine, and his voice was soothing, and his help was good. Hit in the leg, I told him. Not bad if it doesn't go green. Can you put weight on it? he asked me as he pulled me onto my feet. "We gotta get moving. If we stay in this one spot, marauders will find us. They're riding and dragging and looking for wounded." Next thing I remember, I was collapsed in a heap on the ground and rocking in pain with my leg. Everything started to go black, and then I remember him pulling me on his back. I heard him say, "Lord have mercy, child. You're as bad off as I am. I'll tote you. I can't right leave you here." I remember being pulled and carried, and I stumbled. I remember hard branches snapping back in my face and mouthfuls of dirt as we hit the ground and kept from being seen. I remember soaking through streams and hauled off into small bluffs and belly crawling through dry fields. I remember these things in a half-sleep light, but I do not remember being carried a powerful long way. The fever must have took me good, because I could feel a cool, sweet smell quite next to my face. Soft, gentle, warm hands were stroking my head with a cool, wet rag. "Look at that, morning's coming," a woman's voice said as it spooned oatmeal porridge into me. "Do your mama know what a beautiful baby boy she has?" "Where am I? Is this heaven?" I asked. She tossed her head and she laughed. "No, child. Pink has brung you home to me, don't you remember?" The mahogany child, I thought. "Both you children been on the run for days, and a miracle of God Almighty brung you both here. Yes, indeed, child, a miracle." I remember thinking, could this war have been so close to this lad's home? I couldn't imagine having a war in my backyard. I looked over and I saw him looking out the windowlet. "Guess you don't remember much," he said. "I'm pink as algae, found in the 48th color. Found you after I lost my company." "My name is Sheldon Curtis," I said weakly. "This is my mother, sweet Momo Bay," he said as she smiled at me. "Lord, Lord, I never thought I'd see my dear boy again," she said as she hugged him. "I've been getting along, though. Pincus, warmed the leftovers in the big house when the family left. Dried goods, too. The rest I've been getting from the woods. There's a freshwater spring. Still got some chickens, even though the old cow in the back still gives some." "Then you've been here all alone?" Pincus asked his mother. "Where is everybody?" "Your daddy run off to fight a month ago. All the hands and their children run off out of harm's way. But I stayed, and I prayed to the Lord every day. My prayers were surely answered because he brought my baby back here to stay," she said. "You ain't ever going to leave your mama again, are you, child?" she said softly. Pincus looked troubled and didn't answer. "I'm going to go down to the stream and pound these clothes of yours," she said. "If you hear marauders, come and go to the root cellar. Stay down there till they're gone. That's what they've been doing." "Marauders here?" Pincus said with alarm. "They've been seen, and they're looking for stuff, but there's nothing left here, child. Nothing." As soon as she left us, Pincus sank on my bedside. "Sheldon boy," he whispered, "as soon as you heal up, we got to get out of here. We're putting Momo Bay in great danger just by being here. If they come and find she's been holding troops," his voice trailed off, "we got to get back on our outfit as soon as we find them." "You mean go back to war?" I asked. I must have gone pale when he said that. "It's the only way, ain't it?" Then he looked at me. "Sheldon, you all right? You look bothered." "You can call me Say," I said. "Everybody in my family calls me Say, not Sheldon. I 'spect you're my family now." "Near enough, Say, near enough," he said. "And you can call me Pink." He said it softly, and he smiled. For the next week, Momo Bay fed us both good. Raw milk and cornbread never tasted so good as in my born days. It was the first time in months my victuals didn't have mealy worms in it. She saw to it that I tried to walk a little every day, so that mean-looking leg don't go stiff on you and cripple up, she said. This place wasn't much different than our farmhouse in Ohio. More people maybe, more poor maybe, but it smelt the same. like pine board and good cooking, a mess of beans and pork salt, cornbread, greens, and onions. When we slept, she sat near us, stoked the fire, and watched over us. Never thought I'd feel safe enough to sleep again. My mother and Kalo, my father, jumped the broom on this very spot, Pink said as we walked the first day outdoors. And that's the master's house, Master Algie, Pink said, and he spoke quiet as he walked along. How come you have the same last name, I asked. Boy, when you're owned, you ain't got no name of your own. Even Kalo had to take his last name. As we rested under the willow tree, Pink asked me about my family back home. Got one brother still at home to help run the place for Pa, I answered. What's your outfit again? Pink asked. He asked that before. Ohio 24. I carried the staff. Wasn't supposed to carry a gun, but there were so many that died, even us boys had to carry one after we were all slaughtered like hogs. At least you got to carry. In the 48, we couldn't have guns at first. We fought with sticks and hammers and sledges. Can you imagine not trusting us to fight our own fight? I can't imagine such a thing. Then, when we finally did get muskets, they were from the Mexican-American War, and they were jammed and misfired. Then why in God's name do you want to go back? I asked. Because it's my fight. Say, ain't it yours too? If we don't fight, then who will? I had no answer, but God forgive me, I didn't want to go back. After a few days more, I could walk a little steadier, but still needed help. Pink took me to the big house and we walked through it. Weren't much left really, it was mostly burnt out. Master Allie had a library full of books right here, he said. He taught me to read, even though it was against the law. He must have been a good man, I said. More bad than good, say. Sometimes I think he just liked being read to. There's a big book of poetry, say. It was this thick, and every night I read aloud to him from that book. I blessed this house because of those beautiful books, but I cursed it too for what it stood for. We walked a bit further. To be born a slave is a heap of trouble, say. But after Algie taught me to read, even though he earned a person, I knew that nobody ever could really own me. You feel hot, Pink, I said. Lord, I think you're as sick as me. Let me fetch you back to the house. I'll be fine. Just tired, that's all. I'll be ready to fight, though. I'll be ready to fight. The night afterwards, we ate. Mobo Bay came back to the table with a worn old Bible. She was so happy. My heart ached, though, because I didn't want to tell her we'd be leaving soon. Master Allie showed me how to read how paper talks. Show him, Pink, she said. She took out a pair of spectacles from his pocket, and he opened the Bible to the Psalm of David and started to read. His voice was steady and had such power. Just hearing them words made the pictures come into my head. I sure wish I could read, I announced without thinking. Then when Pink saw I was ashamed and he took my hand. I'll teach you, say. Someday, I'll teach you. I could feel my face flushing, and then I spoke. I done something important, I announced. I touched Mr. Lincoln's hand. It were in Washington. We were quartered there just before Bull Run, and the president himself was shaking everybody's hands, and I just put my hand right out there. And he took it? Pink asked. Yep, he took it, I answered. Now there's a sign, ain't it? He said, smiling. Touch my hand, Pink. Now you can say that you touched the hand that shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln. Next best thing to touching it, said Momo Bay. Most of the next day, Pink was studying an old map. Marauders don't fan farther out than 30 miles or so from their camps, so if they come here, their unit must be that close. We got to get south of the river. See here, say? That's where my troops are heading, and we can meet them about here, I figure. Meet up with who? You ain't leaving. His mother's voice caught as she came towards us. Now, my mother, you know we can't stay here. You know why. No, my babies know, she cried. She was inconsolable for a time. Mother, this war has to be won, or this sickness that has taken our land will never stop. Pink always called slavery the sickness when he talked. We have to go. He knelt at her feet, and by the look that came into her eyes, she knew that this day was coming. I could feel my breath catch, and my chest was heavy. My hands were sweaty, and I felt sick to my stomach. That night I couldn't sleep. What's wrong, child? Momo Bay said from her chair. I don't want to go back, I blurted out. I know, child, she said. Of course you don't. You don't understand. I took up and run from my unit. I was hit when I was running. I sobbed so hard my ribs hurt. I'm a coward and a deserter. She looked at the fire and said nothing for the longest time. Then her voice covered my cries. You ain't nothing of the kind. You're a child. Of course you're scared. Ain't nobody not scared. I'm not brave like Pink. I'm not brave. Child, being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. Don't you know that? I don't want to die. There's nothing worse than death, child. There's things worse than death, child, but you got nothing to fear. You're here now, and I'm hugging you, and you're going to be an old man someday. And when it's your time, the sweet Lord will send a hummingbird to fly your soul to heaven. Now, you ain't afraid of hummingbirds, are you? Her words brought me sweet sleep. That night, I dreamt of hummingbirds and green pastures full of sunlight and wildflowers. The next morning, we mustered to leave, and we packed cornbread and salt pork and dried beans. I would have done just about anything to stay, but my place was to go with Pink, and I owed him that. Just as we were making a last sweep of the place, making sure there was no sign of anything that we had been there, we heard wild screams and shrieks coming from the woods. Marauders, Pink said as he grabbed a piece of wood. Momo Bay took it from him. Get to the root cellar. There's no truck and a dark old woman. You get to that cellar, you hear? We didn't like it, but she pushed us. Hurry, before they're here. She lifted the root cellar door and shoved us in. Don't you come out till I tell you. She's going to draw 'em off, Pink whispered. When the marauders came in, my heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd be able to hear it above us. There was a small commotion when they ransacked looking for food, and then there was silence, and then a single shot echoed through the trees outside. There was a loud war whoop as they thundered off. We waited for a sign from Momo Bay, but there didn't come one. Finally, we climbed out and we ran outside to see Momo Bay laying just beyond the porch. We put her in harm's way staying here, Pink cried as he held her in his arms. Her eyes were looking into a far-off place as he closed them. Your son loves you, Momo Bay. Your son loves you. He held her and he kissed her, and we both held our hands until there was no more warmth in it. After we buried her along the willow trees, we set out. Pink and I figured it'd be 3 days' walk to the Union troops, and we watched the movement of the sun. Her words still rang in my heart. Her words about being brave. My steps were as sure now as they had ever been. We walked into the opening, as clear as the country. Take these, Pink said. He took his spectacles from his pocket. If they catch me with them, there'll be trouble. When we caught up to us, one yelled, Where are you going with that dark boy? Boy, what outfit are you part of? I was afraid to answer because of my northern accent. And then I couldn't answer. Are you Union boy? One jerked us as he pulled my uniform from my knapsack. No, I ain't no Yankee. I got that from a dead one, I sputtered, trying to convince them. That's when we were grabbed. My words had given us away. We were prisoners of the Confederate Army. We were held up in a barn that night, and Pink shivered with fear, and I held him as he had done me before. The next morning, we were thrown into a boxcar, and we rode for what seemed 2 days, stopping many times. When the door slid open, The daylight was blinding. We rode into a buckboard and were taken toward town. The townsfolk looked hard at us. All we had left was mean looks and a heap of hate. We jarred to stop in front of the gates and marked the entrance of a stockade. It said, Andersonville, Pink whispered. My heart stopped. I had heard of this place. It was one of the worst of the Confederate camps. When we were pulled from the buckboard, we fell hard to the ground. No, I begged, as they pulled us both along. Because of his fever, Pink stumbled and fell. They dragged him along with such meanness. He did not protest until they forced us in different directions. When he reached for me, I said, Let me touch the hand that touched Mr. Lincoln, said. Just one more time. I watched tears fall from his eyes, and he cleaved my hand until they wrenched us apart. They smote him and dragged him away. He looked back at me and he tried to say something more, but they crossed his back and knotted him and pushed him along. Sheldon Russell Curtis was released from Albertson prison some months later, weighing no more than 78 pounds. Albertsonville was built to hold only 10,000 prisoners, but by the end of the war it held 38,000 soldiers. There was no fresh water, no shelter, and no food. 13,000 men and boys died of starvation and hysteria. Sheldon Curtis returned to his home and recovered. He settled in Brumlin Township in Michigan. He married Abigail Bernard and fathered 7 children. He became a grandfather and a great-grandfather during his lifetime, and he died a very old man in 1924. Pincus Algie never returned home. For him, there was to be no wife, no children, no grandchildren to remember him. It was told that he was hung within hours after he was taken into Albertsonville, and his body was thrown into a lime pit. I know this story is true because Sheldon Russell Curtis told his daughter Rose. Rose Curtis Stone told this to her daughter Estella. Estella Stonewall Barber, in turn, told it to her son William. And he told it to me, his daughter Patricia. When my father finished the story, he always put out a hand and said, This is the hand that touched the hand, has touched the hand, that has shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln. This book serves as a written memory of Pincus Allie, since there are no living descendants to do so for him. When you read this, before you put this book down, say his name out loud and vow to remember him always. A wonderful book to the memory of Pincus Allie. Pink and Say, a beautiful tribute to a wonderful friendship.